I'm getting a bit sick of this project, so it's supposed to kind of look like a flower. It's really not a color that I would use for myself. Where's my ball of yarn? Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Juliette and I'm a PhD student based in Cambridge who also likes to knit a lot, and this is my knitting podcast. It's been quite a while since the last episode, I think about a month now, and it's partly because I didn't really have time to film because right after the last episode I went to France to visit some family, and it's also then been the start of the new academic year here in Cambridge, which is usually quite a busy period. Over the summer I was mostly working from home, so I had quite a lot of time to film and my hours were quite a bit more flexible, whereas now I'm back to going to the office pretty much 4 or 5 times a week. So yeah, it's been quite busy, and unfortunately that also means that I haven't got that much progress on my knitting projects. So I think today's going to be a relatively short episode where I just talk to you about some updates of previous projects and also some musings about what project I want to cast on next. I'm also on 4 coffees today, and this is a decaf tea that I'm having because I need to calm down. So if I seem a bit buzzed and shaky today, that's probably why. So the first project I'm going to talk about today is something that was also featured in my last podcast, which is the sweater number 23 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. So last time I talked about how I had to frog the sleeve that I had already knitted fully because I was having issues where I felt like the sleeve width or circumference was just a bit too tight. I even did a mid-project block to check the sleeve and stuff. I was wondering whether blocking might help it, but in the end I was just pretty sure that it wasn't going to work. So I basically frogged the entire sleeve that I had completed to redo again based on like a more frequent stitch pickup rate around the armhole here. So I talked about the details of that in the previous episode, but the update is that basically I'm almost done with the sleeve. I've got about like 2 centimeters of the ribbing left to do, and then that's it. So I'll be able to move on to the right sleeve, because this is the last one, and the rest of the body. I'm not gonna lie though, I'm getting a bit sick of this project because the yarn is, by the way, Heel-Hold Ullspinderi in Handvask yarn, which is like a iron weight yarn. And it's really scratchy and not really pleasant to the touch. It's also not a pleasant knitting experience because it's very toothy, so whenever you're knitting with it, the yarn just kind of sticks to itself. So it's not like a smooth gliding feeling on needles, even though I've got the Knit Pro Symphony needles, which are very smooth. So yeah, not the most pleasant experience, even though it's like an iron weight project and therefore like quite a thick gauge, and I'd have thought it would go by quite quickly, which it does because yeah, I'm working with a large gauge, but it's not necessarily gliding quite quickly and smoothly on my needles, so I feel like it's taking a bit longer than I expected. I really thought I would be done with this jumper like in a month of not even knitting on it that frequently, just because that's how large the gauge is. But it's actually not been the case, and I'm really just not enjoying the feel of this yarn. I'm a bit worried that I won't actually get to wear this much because of just how scratchy the yarn is. It will definitely have to be something that I wear on top of like a t-shirt or a long sleeved like inner top so that it doesn't irritate my skin, because just from like feeling it, and this is like post blocking, right, because I did a mid-project block, even just like the feel of it in my hands is quite scratchy. So who knows, I'll definitely finish the project, because what am I going to do with this yarn if it's not being knitted up? But yeah, not as quick and easy of a project as I thought it would be. The next work in progress is these pairs of ankle socks that was part of the Yucca's Mystery knit-along that was running throughout the month of August. I ended up just like not being able to follow through with the weekly clues, and so I still have this on my needles even though this KAL ended at the end of August. But I am making progress. So if you are not aware of how a KAL works, or like a mystery KAL works, you usually get basically a clue for different sections of the pattern as you go along. So the way this KAL worked is that first it came with a clue for the twisted ribbed cuff here, and then this section, which is kind of makes up a cute flower design. I love showing this on camera because it shows up so well. So it's supposed to kind of look like a flower when you look at it like this from the top if you roll the cuff down. But anyway, the sock is meant to be worn like this. And then you move on to this really beautiful kind of quilt stitch heel flap pattern, which was so interesting to work on because it was like a completely new technique to me. And then the rest of the foot is worked in the seed stitch pattern, which is kind of just stockinette with a grid of purl stitches along the way. It's not really showing up too well because the light is not working with me too well today, but I hope you can kind of see what it looks like right now. I've been slowly working on these, specifically whenever I take the train. I've been taking this project with me, but I haven't been taking the train as much this past month. That's why I haven't really made that much progress. But I am on the part where you basically do the decreases for the gusset. For the first time since like knitting socks, I've had a pattern where the decrease rate changes over the length of the gusset. So usually, like in any sock pattern that I've worked with in the past, it's like for every other row, you decrease around these kind of stitches here until you reach the right foot circumference. On this pattern, it's actually making me do the decreases every other round for a while. And then it moves on to doing the decreases every 3 rows. So it basically decreases the decrease rate, essentially, to have a kind of a decrease or a gusset shape that looks like a foot a bit more. I don't know if I'm explaining myself really well here, but yeah, the rate of decrease rows changes, and I've never had that happen before, so I'm quite interested in seeing whether that actually improves the fit around this part of the foot, which can sometimes feel a bit tight, maybe because of the way the decrease that I usually do, which is every other row, it might just be a bit too rapid. So yeah, I'm quite excited to kind of get this off my needles because it's been quite a while. But I'm not necessarily prioritizing this project either because I have other things I want to work on, which I'm going to talk about. I just want to mention the yarn, which is Filcolana Avetta in the color Caribbean Blue or Sea. I never know which one it is. I have to say, a bit annoying to work with. It's quite splitty, this yarn, and it's very soft. I mean, the fact that it's super soft is quite nice, but I've often lost my stitches because I've pulled on the needles to kind of do the magic loop a bit too quickly, and like the stitches just fell off the needles just from how smooth they are, basically. I also switched to different size needles. So I used to work on my first pair of ChiaoGoo 2.25mm needles, which I thought for the longest time, basically from buying them 2 years ago until a month ago, that they were 80cm needles. And when I was working 2 socks at a time on those 80cm needles, I was struggling a lot with the cable not being long enough. And a lot of people suggested I use 100cm needles, so that's what I did. I bought some hundreds. And then I realized that actually my old needles, they're not at all 80cm needles, they're 60cm needles. So maybe if I had just bought the correct 80cm needles, I wouldn't have struggled as much with the 2 at a time. Because with 100cm needles, I'm finding that maybe the cable is just a tad too long. It makes it so that like I never have to worry about the cable length, but maybe the 80 would have been fine. Anyway, I discovered that my original sock knitting needles were 60cm long and not 80. So, I mean, you learn something new every day. I'm actually not following the finished object, work in progress, and then like future plans format at all today. We're just going with the flow, apparently. So this is the finished object for today, which is actually something that you probably recognize from quite a few episodes ago now. These are the socks for my partner's birthday present, which were due 3 months ago, but his birthday is in the summer, so he didn't really mind too much that my present was late. But I did say that I would try to finish it before autumn, and I did, so I'm quite happy with that. I actually finished these during my trip to France, so that was quite fitting because it was right before October rolled around. I know technically autumn starts in September, like 21st or something, but we were in France, which was quite warm, so it feels very fitting that these are done now in October, well into October actually. I'm not going to go over too many details because honestly I didn't do anything different from the pattern. These are just like the basic ribbed socks by Kate Atterley. I really like the heel flap on this because it's like a very beautiful kind of, I think it's called Eye of the Partridge heel flap. Oh, I do need to weave in this end, I suppose. But this is a really good pattern for gift knitting because the ribbing is very forgiving. So it means that like it will fit pretty much any size as long as you're somewhat close to that person's foot size in terms of length. You don't have to worry too much about the foot circumference and therefore your gauge being too tight or anything, because the ribbing is just kind of very kind of flexible and forms around the foot and the leg of the person. A great option for gift knitting. I will definitely be knitting this again because my father wants this pair of socks for Christmas. Yeah, my father requested a pair of socks just like these for his Christmas present. So this is definitely not the last time you'll be seeing this pattern because I will definitely be reknitting it for him. The yarn, by the way, is the Camel's Yarn BFL Twist sock yarn, which I got at the East Anglia Yarn Festival this year. And it's in the color By Salt and Sea, which is a really cute grey with a slight tint, like slight specks of orange, which are not really showing on camera, but it's got like tiny dots of kind of brownish orange, almost like a rusted look, which is really cute. I'm gonna say that this is like an almost finished project because the other sock is like almost done. I can show you the first sock that I finished, which is another ribbed sock, but this is a DK version. I think this is called a DK Treasures ribbed socks, which is also a free pattern. I think the other one's a free pattern as well. I can't remember the name of the designer, but I'll link it in the description. It's another gift knit. Been quite busy with gift knits apparently. And this is a gift knit for my friend's 25th birthday. I'm gonna give her a few other things along with these socks. Basically, she's the one who received 2 knitted jumpers, like 1 jumper and 1 cardigan so far. And she mentioned that how sad she was that she wasn't getting another jumper this year because I said I was no longer taking jumper commissions. And yeah, I think she will appreciate this knitted item because it's quite cozy, these DK socks. I've already knitted this once before, actually for my dad as well. And they are very comfy socks that you can either wear with boots in the winter for like a really warm accessory, or just in the house if you want to just have like lounging socks basically. The yarn is Emma's Yarn Spectacular Socks DK or something along those lines. It's the yarn that I used to get with the Yarnworks yarn subscription for Emma's Yarn brand. And then I switched over to the Market Towns yarn, which was their own in-house hand-dyed yarn. And so this was like the 2024 February colorway, which, because it's Valentine's, it's obviously pink with these really cute specks of purple. It's really not a color that I would use for myself, but this friend in particular loves anything pink. As soon as I received that sock yarn and I was thinking, not really gonna work for me, I immediately knew that I would definitely be able to use it as a gift for this person in particular at some point. So yeah, I'm gonna gift this to her the next time I see her. Her birthday was about 3 weeks ago, but she was away at the time. So I hope she appreciates it. Right, so I did say that I wanted to kind of move on to new projects and stuff. And so I've actually been casting on some gauge swatches and also been winding yarn and stuff like that. So I thought I would talk about that today as well. Because of my grievances with the yarn for the sweater number 23, which I mentioned earlier, I've been really itching to cast on something that's just kind of merino based. And so I've already mentioned some of the projects that I've been thinking about casting on in my autumn winter knitting plans video, and one of them was the balloon sweater, which I plan to knit up in this Knitting for Olive Merino in the color Petroleum Green and the soft silk mohair that goes with it as well. So I did my little gauge swatch, which is still a tiny bit damp, but I actually need to check if this meets the gauge, the tension that I need, which is 21 centimeters. But this was like a drastically different knitting experience just for the swatch compared to the Hjelholt Spindery handvask yarn. I mean, there's a reason why people say, I lost my yarn. Where's my ball of yarn? So I really understand why people are obsessed with this yarn combination. It is incredibly soft. And just the knitting experience of it, just from the gauge swatch, was really, really pleasant. And so I think I definitely want to cast this on. I was trying to be a bit better at like monogamous knitting, at least for big jumper projects for this autumn winter season, but this sweater number 23 is really not giving me joy. So I think I'm better off casting on something that will be more pleasant. And then on the days where I feel like I can tackle the Yellow Sprindery yarn, I'll move on to that one. But on some days where I just want to have some smooth, pleasant knitting, I'll probably be knitting on this stuff. I'll check the gauge off camera later. But if the tension is alright, then I'm gonna start casting on the balloon sweater. So the balloon sweater I've mentioned in more detail in my autumn winter plans video, but it's an old pattern from Petite Knit, which features this really dramatic balloon sleeve, but it's otherwise just a regular drop shoulder construction. It's really cute, and I think it will look really nice in this color. By the way, are we sensing a theme here in terms of the sort of colors that I like? Yeah. And then while waiting for this gauge swatch to dry, I actually did cast on another gauge swatch with a different yarn. And it's actually Drops Daisy and Drops Kid Silk Mohair, both in the color Marzipan, which is so, like, such a lovely neutral beige that does not veer too yellow. Because I'm technically like a dark winter palette, and apparently cool toned beiges suit me better than yellow toned beiges. So I think this kind of fits that description quite well. But if you remember from my autumn winter knitting plans video, I was planning to cast on the cardigan number 9 by My Favorite Things Knitwear using this yarn. But actually, I might change my mind again. I think the Poetic Pullover by Sari Nordland is really, really cute and would look lovely in this color. So I started doing the gauge swatch for it. It's actually quite off gauge. Like, let me just preface this by saying that the Poetic Pullover is supposed to be like a light fingering and mohair combination, such as Knitting for Olive Merino and Soft Silk Mohair. But I did see someone in the project pages who's knitting this in this exact same yarn combination. So Drops Daisy and Drops Kid Silk and Marzipan, same colors. Sari Nordland's size chart for this pullover starts quite small. I think the smallest size is 90 centimeter bust circumference for the finished object. And I thought, first of all, I've noticed that for any Sari Nordland jumper that I've been thinking about knitting, I will probably always have to go quite a few sizes up compared to the recommended ease, because it seems like Sari Nordland prefers less positive ease in her garments, basically, whereas I would prefer like quite more oversized stuff. So based on that, even if my gauge is much bigger, I think it will be alright, because then I can just do a few sizes smaller than I would, and I will get the right fit. Basically, I'm just going to do some knitting maths to make sure that the gauge that I'm getting and the size that I'm choosing will give me about 20 to 25 centimeters of positive ease, which is usually my sweet spot. But because I am doing this off gauge with a different kind of yarn tension, I don't really have any guidance on which needle size to use. And the person who is doing this project in this yarn combination did not put their needle size on their Ravelry page. So I just went with 4.5mm needles, because this yarn combination would be good for 5mm needles. But then I saw that Sari Nordland, instead of using 4mm needles for her light fingering and mohair combination, which would usually call for 4mm, she used 3.5 instead. I think because lace tends to kind of expand a lot more, and you're better off using a slightly smaller needle size to have your lace patterns in knitting show up a bit better, a bit cleaner, basically. So yeah, all this to say, I'm probably going to knit this very off gauge. I'm using 4.5mm needles to do my little swatch, and we'll calculate the gauge that I get with that, and I'll do some knitting maths to basically convert this pattern for this knitting tension. There's an account I follow on Instagram that recently did a very good video on how to convert your knitting gauge to make the pattern work for you in a different gauge, basically. I will link the name and the description of this person, and I've heard that a lot of people have found it very useful. I have a math degree, so I should be able to do the maths myself, but if you ever wondered how you want to convert a pattern to a different gauge size, I will highly suggest watching that video, because she probably explains it better than any time I've tried to explain the knitting math in any of my videos. And then another project that I've been thinking about casting on, and this is much more like a long-term project. I can't quite remember if I mentioned this in my autumn knitting plans video. I think I have. I was planning to make the sweet shop blanket over a long period of time because it's a blanket. I don't expect it to be done in the same time frame as, say, a jumper. And I kind of mean it for it to be a project that I kind of work on a little bit over a long period of time, basically. So the sweet shop blanket, I was planning to knit it with some Advent yarn that I got a year ago. This is actually also the camel's yarn by Salt and Sea, which was the colorway for my partner's socks, are one of the colors in the Advent. So that's going to be quite fun. So this is my whole bag of all my little Advent calendar mini skeins. It all looks very pretty, very aesthetic when you receive it. But then you forget that you actually have to wind all these mini hanks, and all 24 of them. So that's what I've been doing lately. I've got 5 out of 24 mini skeins wound up now. These are some of them that I've wound up, and it's quite, annoying and time consuming to have to do that. So bear that in mind if you're getting any Advent yarn calendars for Christmas. You'll spend quite a bit of time winding some yarns. But one of the yarns that I wound up, which I kind of wanted to highlight for today's video, was this color, which I think is the Mussels color. And just I feel like it's such an accurate rendition of that colorway. This is exactly the sort of colors that you get from mussels, right? Imagine a mussel with its stuff from the sea that's stuck on it, including some of the algae, which you can see in this yellowish green here. I feel like you can easily guess that it's a mussel colorway without having been told that it's the mussel colorway. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight that because it was one of my favorite colors from the collection. But yeah, I've got 5 down, 19 to go, slowly working on it. And then once I've got all 24, I'm going to try to plan kind of which colors to use throughout the blanket. And I'm also thinking of doing project vlog that I do over the course of multiple episodes, a bit like what Knits by Mandy did for her Stella quilt blanket, where she kind of did a several episode series of her progress on making that blanket. I'm gonna assume that this is gonna be quite a long project that might even take over a year to complete. I did hear that to make 1 square of the blanket, and you have 48 to do total, Laura Penrose, who's the designer, took about an hour per square. But then a friend of a friend apparently took 3 hours per square. So I don't know how quickly I can get through, but I feel like it's realistic to think that every time I sit down to knit on this, I will try to complete 1 square within 1 sitting. I feel like that will be a good way of making sure I am progressing well throughout this project. All right, and to finish off this episode, I just wanted to talk about some very small acquisitions. So we've had a Søstrene Grønne, I'm sure I'm butchering the name of that shop. Søstrene Grønne opened in Cambridge, finally. And I was very, very excited about it. So 2 days after the opening, I went to the shop, and they very notoriously have a knitting section. The yarn that they have is mostly cotton yarn, and also they sell a lot of circular needles, but they're all 60 centimeters long. So, I mean, it's good if you want to make a hat or something, but you can't really use it for project making, I suppose, or it won't be very comfortable for project making. But I was quite surprised to see some stitch markers, which is very cute because they come in this ring and there's 10 stitch markers total. And they look so cute. So I grabbed these. They were only £4.36. And then since I've been doing a bit of sewing, I also grabbed these fabric clips, which you can use these fabric clips as an alternative to fabric pins. So if you're not really comfortable with pins, or if you just can't be fussed to place some pins, these fabric clips are apparently much easier to place if you want to hold fabric together and stuff, or when you're sewing. So these are my little purchases from Søstrene Grønne, and I'm quite excited to see how much their yarn collection, or knitting collection, continues to grow. I did see that most of their yarn was cotton yarn, but they also did have some, I think, wool and viscose blend blown yarn, as well as 100% superwash merino yarn as well. But those collections were much smaller than their cotton collection. So this concludes our knitting podcast today. As I said, today's episode was a bit shorter than usual because I haven't made too much progress on stuff. And I'm about to kind of cast on some more projects right now, so we're right at the kind of in-between stage between projects, which means that my knitting podcast might not be as exciting as usual. But yeah, hopefully you still enjoyed today's episode. By the way, I forgot to mention that I'm wearing my PhD vest today, and the yarn was sponsored by Marketown Yarns. Thank you very much for that again. It's the Squishy DK sock yarn in the color Stacy, which is this really cute petroleum green. And the pattern is by me, it's the PhD vest. Quite a relatively quick knit because this gauge is like 20 stitches gauge, and it's also a vest, so it doesn't take too much time to knit. So if you're interested in knitting this pattern, I will make sure to leave the link to the pattern page for on Ravelry so that you can purchase it online. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you at the next one. Bye!